This is Coach Jason Ballard, and I'm a business wingman. Over the years, I've learned a lot from working in our family construction business, serving as a senior officer in the United States Air Force, and running 12 different organizations around the world. Many people helped me get to where I am today, and it's my mission in life to serve as a personal wingman to others. That's what this podcast is all about, providing knowledge, tools, resources, and mentorship to help people soar to their highest altitude. And welcome back to the Soar Higher podcast. This is your host, Coach Jason Ballard. Awesome to be with you today. Boy, we got a really good show in store for you, touching on some things that are on top of business leaders' minds all day, every day, as of the past year or so. This is really an area where a lot of people are struggling and just can't crack the code and figure out how to move forward in the most productive way. So what are we talking about today? We're talking about how to get your employees engaged, and not just get them engaged, but to keep them engaged for the long run. Lot of dynamics involved in that. There's a lot of stuff going on in the workforce that's driving employee behavior, mindset, needs, lots of things evolving. And so if you're a leader, business owner, et cetera, running an organization, you got employees working with you, you are going to be excited about this show. We're going to learn all of these types of things, what to look for. How do you know you're doing it well? How do you know if you're in trouble or not? And we're going to be giving you obviously some great tips, tools, and resources to put you on the right path if you're not already. So today we have the privilege of having an expert in this space, literally wrote the book on it. Today we have the privilege of having Tom Willis on the show. Tom is the co-founder and partner of a company called Phoenix Performance Partners, which is a consulting firm that helps organizations with building thriving cultures, driving high levels of employee engagement, and maximizing the performance of the individuals as well as the organization as a whole. Like I said, he's an author. He wrote the book called The Great Engagement, which is an amazing book that outlines all the details of this topic. And so I highly encourage you to check out the book. We're going to learn a little bit more about the book and the contents of it as we go forward. But without further ado, Tom, welcome to the show, my friend.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Excited to talk about this.
Yeah, this is on the minds of leaders all over the place. You know, as a business coach, I work with companies all over the world, and this is a topic of discussion in all the sessions all the time. You know, people are number one resource, and what to do with them, how to leverage them, how to engage them. So, Tom, help us understand a little bit more about you and your background and kind of how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, happy to. I've been lucky to have lots of doors opened, and as my dad taught me, when you get an opportunity, say yes, and see where it takes you. And I've had some great jobs along the way. Some that were great, not because I liked them, but because they were really, they formed who I am. One summer I got a job at a window factory, working 6 days a week, 10 hours a day, making custom windows, and made a lot of money, but I hated it, and it was a great motivator to get A's in college. And so I've had great jobs like that, paper routes, and then I've worked with some pretty huge companies like Intel and PricewaterhouseCoopers. And again, great learning experiences. I learned that I was probably more of an entrepreneur than I thought I was. And so yeah, I've done a lot of different things. I was a school superintendent for a while in Detroit, Michigan. And for about the last decade, I've been working with school superintendents and CEOs across the country to help them create what we call exceptional cultures with high performing teams.
What a diverse background. What was it like to be a superintendent of a school system in this day and age? That I'm sure that wasn't easy.
Well, it was a decade ago, so it's a very different world even than it was 10 years ago. Actually, 5 years ago. Pre-pandemic, post-pandemic. A lot of our clients are schools, and it's a challenging job. Going into COVID, obviously, none of them had gone through this before, and people were looking to them for answers. So, very challenging. And now, in the sort of post COVID world, it's even more challenging because I think you've got mindsets of parents and kids like, well, we don't need to go to school. We can just skip a day and learn from home. And for many kids, that may be possible, but for many, it's not. And the absenteeism is through the roof. And so it's a hugely challenging time. And I have a lot of respect for not just school superintendents, but leaders, educators up and down through schools, because it's a difficult and challenging time politically as well. A lot of polarization going on. So God bless our teachers and our educators.
Yeah, I think absenteeism is up in obviously the school systems, but in the workforce as a whole. There's more sick leave being taken in the past few years. There's more people are more in depth to leave faster than they used to. They used to, have conversations with you. People just don't show up to work, and you call them for a few days. Oh yeah, I moved on. You're like, what? So just a lot of different things going on. And so Tom, help us understand the workforce. You're an expert in employee engagement and the people dynamics of working well together as an organization. Give us kind of paint a picture of where you see the workforce today. How is that different? And what are some of the challenges coming out of that?
Yeah, well, let me throw out a few numbers for you that might be interesting for your audience. One of them is the number 500. Over 500 million days are missed every year because of workplace stress, because of workplace related stress. Huge number of absenteeisms, as you said, costing over $500 billion to the US economy every year. It's multi trillions if you look at it more globally. And it's a lot of it boils down to, I think, people went into COVID and they realized that a lot of their jobs they weren't really terribly engaged in. They didn't really have a lot of care for what they were doing. They didn't see like the value and the purpose of it. And so you had a lot of people who had sort of awakening type experiences. And if they could, they would quit and go get another job or go try something else. And I think what people are learning is that the grass isn't necessarily always greener. Just quitting and going somewhere else isn't necessarily going to create that great job for you with a huge amount of purpose. And so there's a lot of turmoil going on. And Gallup just last month actually released their latest engagement survey numbers. And it's sad, frankly. I think it's pathetically sad that only 30% of our employees are engaged in their work. 30%. That means
Mm.
70% of employees are checked out, are basically coming in for a paycheck, which there's obviously there's a need for that too. But if you don't really have any sort of engagement in your work, then you're going to mostly give the minimum effort and obviously not have a lot of fun at work either, not be terribly engaged in what you're doing. So there's a huge amount of upside here. That's the good news as for us leaders, is that it starts with a really taking a look in the mirror and saying, as the leader, what am I going to do about this? Because just blaming society or blaming this generation or blaming the current state of affairs is not going to get you anywhere. That may be true. It make you feel good. It's a good pity party. But at the end of the day, as leaders, we have to step up. We have to do something about this. And that's where our book, The Great Engagement, comes in, is we tried to lay out some very pragmatic insights on things that leaders can do to increase their level of engagement. Because the more you do that, it's pretty simple. The more people are going to enjoy coming to work, the more you're going to produce, the more fun you're going to have. There's lots of downstream effects coming from really focusing on making your culture better and making it more engaging.
So Tom, let's kind of start with a baseline here. What would you describe as a good baseline definition of engagement, employee engagement? I think some people may have different understandings of what that is. Like some people like, oh, people show up to work on time and they put in their 8-hour day and they go home like they're engaged. I'm getting my time from them. Some people like, oh my gosh, they're engaged if they stay late and work overtime and they care about everything they're doing. Like there's different ends of the spectrum, I think, out there. So What do you think is a good definition that we can all base from?
Yeah, I wish there was one. Unfortunately, every industry, every company is different. The size of the company matters, because if you're a small team of three, you're going to know like precisely how engaged folks are every single day because you're such a small team. If you're a team of 10,000, it's a little bit
Mm,
harder to get a sense for how engaged folks are. So it really depends on where you are. The key is that you're paying attention to it. Whatever set of metrics you think are important for your organization, starting there and then coming back to it and measuring improvement or measuring regression, keeping an eye on it and talking to your employees, engaging them, ironically enough, in a conversation about how do we make it more engaging around here? What do we need to do so people feel more committed to the purpose of the organization? And so now, pragmatically, there's lots of good stuff out there. We have our own set of surveys that we're happy to share with folks. Gallup has been doing this for decades, and they've got some really good stuff. They're at the core of their questions. It really gets down to, do you like what you do? Do you care about what you do? Do you feel like you're on a mission? It doesn't mean that you're a missionary. It doesn't mean that you're a nonprofit. Even, we've got some for-profit clients that are engineering firms, but they are on a mission to make a difference in the world, and they are fired up by it. They want to help young children look up. In this case, one of our companies that we work with is the CEO is a friend of mine. He's an African American man, and he wants young Black and brown children to look up and to see a CEO of a multi-million-dollar engineering firm and say, "Hey, I could be that someday. I could be the CEO someday." So, he's working hard at trying to create more engagement as they continue to grow, which is not easy, by the way. But it starts with just really laser-like focus on what are we going to measure and how are we going to keep track of it and how are we going to improve things going forward and how are we going to engage our employees so that we're all a part of the solution. It's not an HR thing. It's not a CEO thing, although it starts there. It needs to be an everybody thing. We all need to be cultural ambassadors, making the culture better every single day.
yeah. When I was running companies back in the day, before I was a coach, I always would talk to my people that worked with me, worked around me, worked for me. I was like, you know what? I want this organization to be the kind of organization that when you're driving to work every day, you're praying and you are hoping and you are excited to see green lights ahead of you so you can go through the green lights faster and not be held up by traffic so you can get to work because you're excited to get to work. You didn't want to leave off where you left off yesterday, and now you're excited to drive into work the next day so that you can pick back up and keep moving the baton forward and progressing whatever efforts you were working on down that path because you believe in the team, you believe in what you're doing, and you're feeling empowered and kind of leveraging all, not just a few of your qualified skills and talents, but all of the things, the potential you have to put that forward in a positive manner and really present the full value of what you can present to the organization, to the team, to the customers, to whatever. And that seemed to resonate with people. Like some people really connected with that. And so the question was, okay, so what do we need to do to make that happen?
Yeah, precisely. I love it. I love it. And actually, in the first chapter of our book, we actually laid out a formula for engagement. And you, in a way, you just spoke about it, frankly, that if you really simplify the heck out of it, that if you want more engagement, then you need two critical elements. You need folks to have an aspiration,
Mm,
which is different than inspiration. So we'll talk about that in a second. And then you need people to be empowered. You need people to have the commensurate authority to fulfill their responsibility because we hire smart people and then we handcuff them a lot of times. And we don't do it on purpose, but a lot of leaders are holding the power of their team back because they have a high need for control or because they're such a detail-oriented person that wants to make sure everything is perfect or because they love to, talk a lot about things. They can slow the process down. Whatever it is, different leaders have different underlying challenges. But fundamentally, if you go back to the formula, it's engagement equals aspiration times empowerment. So aspiration is the first and most important part of it, right? And it's different than inspiration. So if I asked you right now, what's the difference between inspiration and aspiration? What would you say?
Inspiration is, in my view, inspiration is more about the degree from which I'm motivated. I'm inspired. This is exciting. This is motivating to me. Aspirational means a little more long term understanding of things. Like I am who I am at the core. These are the God given talents that I have, my abilities that I have to offer, and I want to take them and go do X, Y, and Z in the world. I have aspirations to be a vice president of a department, or a CEO, or a missionary in Africa, or whatever those aspirations are. That's how I would define it. Did I do that correctly, or am I missing your engagement piece here?
No, that's great. That's great. And where do they emanate from? So where does aspiration come from versus where does inspiration typically come from?
Well, in my humble opinion, aspiration is internal. Like that's inside of you as an individual, and what's important to you. What kind of life do you want to live? How many hours do you want to work? How many nice things do you want to have in the world? How many vacations do you want to take? What's really important to you? Quality of your life usually drives aspiration. Inspiration can come from internal, but a lot of times in the workforce, it comes from other people around you, teammates, or a boss, or a leader, or a mentor, or something like that, where they're seeing things in you that you may not see in yourself, and trying to pull those things out to maximize your true talents. Because sometimes people are in tune with themselves and what they can and can't do, and sometimes they're not. And when they're not, and somebody can recognize that and tap into that, boy, some real magical things can happen.
Yeah, yeah, and you're probably good as a coach yourself, right? You're able to inspire a lot of your clients in different
I
days and
try.
different weeks. Yeah, yeah. You've kind of nailed the essence of it, though, right? That inspiration comes from outside typically, and aspiration comes from inside. And both of these are designed to move us towards a different future, towards a compelling future, towards an exciting future. The difference is that if you have an aspiration for something, I don't have to inspire you. It's yours. You're excited about it already. I may remind you of it, which is helpful, but fundamentally, it's yours. That aspiration is something you own and you care about, and you're going to drive forward with
Hmm.
because you're so committed to it. And so that's really easy to get, right? It's really easy to understand that intellectually. It's hard to do it though. But it is the keys to the kingdom in many ways, that if you're a leader and let's say you've got 10 people on your team, there's a good chance 2 or 3 of them are pretty self-motivated. They have
Yeah.
pretty high level aspirations. There's a good chance that 3 or 4 of them are kind of in the middle and could use a little bump there, and 2 or 3 of them are maybe at the other end where they need constant work, constant help. But if you can get all of them or most of them to really figure out, what do they care about in life? What are they here for? What's their short life on earth about? What are they aspiring to? What are they here to serve others to do? And again, it doesn't matter if you're an engineering firm or if you sell widgets or if you're a missionary. There's always some purpose within those things, and just finding it is the key. And when you can help somebody find what they care about and their own aspiration in life, then you've got something to work with as a leader. Then you can take that and map it onto the purpose of the organization. And too often we go about that sort of backwards. We create the mission of the organization, and we basically tell people they need to salute it. They need to buy into it, which is a lot of language that we use. Well, if you think about buy-in is something I'm selling you. It's like a used car salesman. So do we really want people to buy into our mission? I don't think so. I don't think that's really a healthy way to think about it. I get the intent, But we need to slow down and think about, well, let's put our people first. What do they care about? And how do I figure out what the 10 people on my team care about? And then I've got something really powerful and magical to work with. And then I empower them to go do it. I empower them to go make it happen. It doesn't mean I give them a blank check. It doesn't mean they have complete autonomy and freedom, although some might. Figuring out, like, how do I give them more freedom? How do I give them more autonomy so that they are empowered to go make things happen? And when you can bring those two things together, it's amazing what we see happen in cultures. It's just astounding.
Yeah. There's a big difference in, buying into something and believing in something, right? And so when people out there, 'cause I've worked with a lot of different types of people that have, worked with me for me. And some people, as you mentioned, there's always some in a crowd. They're just kind of maybe lost or just trying to feel their way through their career or going through a career transition or just in a different place in their life, and they've lost focus, they've lost some aspiration, they've lost touch with kind of where they are, who they are, and what's next and where to go and how to best use my talents and skills. And so when people are in that space, what are some ways you can work with them? What are some tips and tricks to, kind of, I'm gonna say, wrap around them in a way and get them fired up, get them thinking differently, change that mindset, and help them discover the things they need to discover to kind of take that next level leap from where they're at today.
Well, one of the things I like to say is that leaders really listen the greatness out of their people.
Ooh, I like that.
Listen the greatness out of your people. We constantly hear, before the pandemic, the number one word we heard all around the country and frankly into Europe was communication. Communication is a problem. Well, if you really slow down and unpack that, communication isn't the problem. We have plenty of emails, we have plenty of newsletters, we have plenty of sources of information. We're being communicated to constantly. The problem is we're not listening to each other in general, and especially at the workplace. And so if you want to be a more effective leader, get really good at listening to your people and really getting below the surface of what they're saying, because there's always a deeper level there, a more unconscious level. So the first thing is just go talk to them, go ask questions, go listen to them, find out what's going on, what's behind this, not avoid it. A lot of us, I was one of these leaders, frankly, I would avoid the tough stuff. I would avoid conversations. And
Mm.
we can't do that. We got to lean into it. We got to say, hey, look, what's up, Sarah? Like, you've been, the last few months, you seem kind of checked out. Are you okay? What's going on? And then just stop there and listen. Keep asking questions and keep having her share with you what's going on in her life so that you can then sort of help her take next steps. Now, that's a simple but really powerful starting point. In our book, we actually lay out three very specific tools that are words everyone's heard, but we come at them very differently. And so to really deeper dive into this, you got to get more into the weeds around what specifically is going awry. What's missing for this person. And so happy to walk through that if that's helpful. But there are three tools that we use quite a bit with folks to help them shape their cultures and to help improve things going forward.
Yeah, I think it would be great if you could break that down into the three different components, because I think that at the root level, that can help people figure out, because a lot of people are busy. A lot of people are nervous to have hard conversations. They're afraid of conflict, afraid of what they may hear out the other side of that. And I think there's less, I'm not saying it's intimidation, but there's this kind of unknown uncomfortableness. Like when you're walking down the hall and you pass by somebody and you're like, hey Tom, yeah, how are you today? And you're like, doing good, doing good. How are you? And everything about them says they're not good, but the words coming out of their mouth says they're good. And then like a day later, you see them in a meeting and you're like, hey Tom, hey, can you hang back for a minute? Yesterday you said you were good, but you didn't look good. And I've noticed X, Y, and Z recently. Is everything really okay? Is there anything we can help you with? Just notice some different things about you, right? What I have seen, and correct me if I'm wrong, is people really want people to care. The question is, they're watching to see if anybody notices and if they care enough to ask or care enough to do something, right? It kind of goes back to the John Maxwell principle of people don't care about what you know or who you are, your title, or anything like that until they know how much you care. So yeah, talk to us about that. Break that down because I think a lot of leaders struggle with this.
Yeah, yeah, they do, especially in sort of fast-paced environments because it's like, oh, we don't have time for that stuff. We got stuff to do. We got stuff to get done. Well, that's great, but if you're a leader, your job actually is to do precisely that. It's to get stuff done through your people. And if your people aren't being effective or if they're disengaged, then you're not doing your job. You are failing as a leader. Now, I know that sounds a little harsh, but that is the reality, is that if your people aren't living up to their full potential, you don't get to blame them. That's actually one of the honors of being a leader is we have to look in the mirror and say, what am I doing? What do I need to do differently going forward? And you brought up the word busy, so I have to go here. It's a quick aside, but a lot of leaders will say, "Oh, I'm too busy for that." Well, that's interesting because if you're too busy to do your number one job, then what are you doing? Right? Like you're a
Yeah.
leader. You're a leader of people. Your number one job is to grow your people, is to care about them so that they grow and they get better. If you're busy doing other stuff, then you're doing the wrong job. You should give up the
Yep.
title of leader. The other thing that's interesting about busy is, we use it as a badge of honor in this country, especially if you ask
Yep.
somebody how they're doing, what's the first thing they say? And I'm guilty of this too. I've been trying to eliminate that word from my vocabulary, but I still sneaks out every once in a while. But I looked up the origin, the etymology of the word busy, and it comes from a Dutch English word, bezieg, which roughly translates into anxiety.
Interesting. Okay.
Think about that for a second, right? We've got a bunch of us running around saying, oh my gosh, I am so anxious. Look how anxious I am. Isn't that amazing how anxious I am? And it's this like badge of honor that we're holding out there as like, look at how cool I am almost. And yet we don't realize what we're really saying is that we're basically really anxious. We're creating all this anxiety for ourselves because we've overwhelmed our lives with busyness. And busyness is no way to live. Now again, we all go there. I go there. It happens. There's times and seasons of our life that are more full. That's the word I've been trying to use instead of busy, by the way. We're more full. But as leaders, we have to slow down and notice that because we can't be too busy for our people.
Love it. I love it. So break down these three components and identify them, explain them because I think these are going to be really fundamental principles that leaders should be able to gravitate to and leverage to connect with their people more and lead their people better.
Yeah, great. Would love to. Would love to. And there's some other tools in the book, by the way, for those folks who are taking a deeper dive into, how one of the things we say is like, how engaged are you in your own life? Let's start with you. If you're
Yeah.
a leader, slow down and start with yourself. And we actually have created a really simple 2-page engaged life inventory, so that it's in the book. If people want to check it out, they can go and download it. Really simple, really quick way to kind of measure how engaged you are. So that's my first bit of advice is to start with yourself first before you try to go quote unquote help others. But once you do that, then and you're ready to go be more helpful to your team members, there are 3 tools, as I mentioned, and they're the order is pretty important. You can't put these out of order because if you do, then they won't work. So the first tool is not a new word to anybody, it's leadership. It's generating a compelling view of the future that others take on as their future. If you think about the most gifted leader of the last century, I would argue it's Dr. Martin Luther King.
Hmm.
What did he do? He put out a future that was very compelling, and most people got on board with it. They said, yeah, I want that future too. Now, some didn't. Some were quite the opposite. That future scared them, and they did some pretty horrific things. But by and large, people followed him because he put out such a future vision that we're like, yeah, I want that future. It changes our country in many ways. So leadership is all about the future. It's that inspiration, it's that purpose, it's that mission, whatever you want to call it. Simply put, it's a future that's compelling and other people take on as their future. Without a future to start with, you got nothing else to work with. You can't use the other two tools because you need to have a shared future first. You need to have a purpose. Now, even in a 30-minute meeting, there should be a purpose for that meeting. What's the point of our meeting? What are we trying to accomplish with this 30 minutes? Because too often we meet for the sake of meeting and nothing gets done, and that's why people don't like meetings. If you just adopt that one practice of every single time you meet, declare one outcome, doesn't have to be 50, just what's one thing we're going to accomplish with this meeting, whether it's a 1-hour meeting, a 5-hour meeting, or a 30-minute meeting. What's the one thing we're going to accomplish? You will have dramatically more engagement because people see like, oh yeah, we're making progress. We're getting something done.
Yep.
People like to get stuff done. So leadership has to come first. Let me stop there before I jump into the other two and see if you have any thoughts or questions or additions.
No, I think you're right on point here. I love it. I agree with it. Keep going. Tell us more.
All right, great. So these next two can go in either order, but I'll start with management. Again, not a word that's new to anybody, but we're doing it all wrong mostly around the world. We cannot manage human beings. Our contention, our assertion is you cannot manage another human being. All you can manage is people's agreements, people's promises. People agree to do something, great. You agree to get me that report by next Tuesday at noon, perfect. We've got a very clear agreement between us. Now I have something to manage. I have your word that I can manage. But I'm managing the word, I'm managing the agreement, not the human being. And people don't like to be managed. I have yet to meet somebody who wants to be managed. And it's why so much disengagement is happening, because we're managing the heck out of our people and nobody wants to be managed. So management, critical. It's very simple. It's very black and white. It either is or it isn't. You either did it or you didn't. And it arises from having a culture of accountability. One of those 10,000 pound words, right? Accountability. Well, accountability, again, is not done very well in most organizations because it's about holding people accountable, which is, again, you can't really do very well. You can do it with fear and you can scare people into it, which is, if that's your leadership approach, great, not great. Good luck. I can't help you. That's not a productive way to live anymore, in my opinion. But it is how much of our historical companies were built, is basically do what I say or you'll get fired. But that's, young kids especially have no patience for that stuff. So fear-based cultures, it's dying quickly. So management's all about getting explicit agreements, getting explicit promises from folks, and now you've got something that you can work with. The third tool is coaching. Again, not a new word, but how we approach it is really important. And one of the things that's so fundamental to coaching that's most often missing is that coaching is only coaching if it's asked for. Coaching is only coaching if it's asked for. If the person's not open to your coaching, if the person's not open to your input or feedback, it is not coaching. In fact, it's very likely damaging the relationship. They've done some studies on this. There's a scarf that's called the SCARF model. And I don't know how they measure this stuff. People much smarter than me, hook up electromagnetic devices to brains. And so they found out really fascinating that asking somebody if they're open to some feedback produces the same reaction in the brain as hearing footsteps in the dark behind you.
Huh. That's interesting.
Footsteps in the dark behind you produces the same result as somebody saying, are you open to some feedback?
Yeah. Fear. Yeah.
Fear, right? Our amygdala kicks in and we don't even know what's happening. It's like we black out almost in the moment. So doesn't mean you can't do that. It just means how you do it is really important. How you approach this, how you get the person to be open to your feedback, be open to your coaching, be open to your perspective is really, really critical. Because if the person isn't open to it, then you should stop. Do not give it to them. I don't care if you're the boss. I don't care if you're the boss's boss's boss. If the person isn't open to it, they're not willing to listen to it, you're not doing any good. you're quite literally going the opposite direction. That may make you feel good because you're like, well, I told them what to do. It gives us a sense of power in our title. Well, yeah, it's not going to work. So we have to slow down and figure out, okay, well then how do I get the person to be open to it? How do I get them to be receptive to different perspectives? And there's 1,000 ways to do that, but one of the best is to be coachable yourself. To start by asking your team for coaching, asking them, hey, look, I'm really struggling with this and I'd love to get your perspective on this. Or, hey, what do you think about this idea I've been kicking around? Or, hey, what are your thoughts on this new initiative that just got rolled out? Ask them for their coaching and do it for several weeks, several months. And all of a sudden you'll start noticing that they're going to start asking you for coaching too, because it's a very reciprocal type of thing. So that's one of many ways to begin to create a coaching culture.
That is really great advice. And I think in some regards kind of goes against the grain of some of the corporate norms of the past. And we've got a whole different workforce out there. We've got a whole different group of people that have left the workforce that might have worked better with. But now we've got a whole new group of people in the workforce that's the dominant group of people with millennials and Gen Zers, and those types of things aren't working, don't work. And you do have to adjust these tactics. You have to leadership is situational. Now people think, oh, I read some, leadership books and now I'm in a position of leadership and I'm going to go out there and, have meetings and tell people what to do and get some feedback back. But that's not leadership. Leadership is understanding the situation as the situation evolves with the different types of people with different profiles and different places in life, different maturities, different everything, and understanding those dynamics and being able to meet them where they're at to continue to bring them together, get them to contribute their best skills and talents in a unified manner. And that's an art. That is not a science. That is an art to be able to have the wherewithal to understand those things, see those things, and quickly navigate through them to keep people engaged and focused during these different things that are going on, good or bad, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I love that you brought that word up, art. It's very creative. Both leadership and coaching are very creative. They're very artistic if you think
Yeah.
about it. Management's not. It's actually quite scientific. It's very simple.
Yep.
You can spend very, very little of your time managing things. You should we encourage folks to spend most of their time coaching and leading because that's where the real value is. Getting agreements takes seconds, literally can take seconds. And then you got to follow up with those agreements. Part of accountability, by the way, comes from the root of the same word as account. Like accounting. Well, in accounting, to be an effective accountant, you have to keep track of the assets and the liabilities, right? The debits and the credits, the good and the bad. Well, the same is true in accountability and holding people to account is to keep track of, okay, you made 32 promises or 32 agreements this month and you kept 31 of those. That's great. That's it. You're done. Or you made 22 promises this month and you kept 16. That's not so great. Period. You're done. The management's over. Now you can shift and put your coaching hat on and
Yeah.
say, hey, so what happened? This hasn't happened before. What happened this past month? Are you okay? What can we do? How do I help you going forward? How do we help avoid this next month? Anything you need from me, you can have a coaching conversation. But the actual management part of it, the accounting of successes and failures is really quick and really pretty easy.
I totally agree. Tom, you are spot on, man. And so as we're kind of, man, this show's really gone by fast. We've got a few minutes left in the show. It would be great if you could tell us a quick story of a situation you came into where, let's say, the employees weren't engaged and there were some issues going on, and you came in and you worked with them and you saw certain things put into place, and over a period of time there was a good news story, a good outcome to it. Share one of your best stories with us.
Well, there's a lot. There's actually a story in the book about $1 million theft. We had somebody
Oh my gosh.
confess to us that they had stole $1 million. But I'll let people read that one.
Well, I'm going to argue that guy was actually, or that girl was really engaged. If that they got away with $1 million, that was good.
They didn't get away with it. They finally confessed because they realized that that's not their higher purpose was much different than what they were
Right.
doing to serve their own comfort zone and their own fear based approach to it. But yeah, that's one story that's pretty cool. But we had a CFO actually who we typically our work is not it's easy, it's elegant, but it's not easy to do. It's not easy to bring to
Yeah.
life. So we typically will start with a couple day retreat with the CEO and the executive team. Because you gotta come to work. You gotta come ready to play if you're gonna really do this work the right way. And we actually guarantee our results, by the way, which is pretty unusual in this space. And so that's why I think a lot of our CEOs refer us to so many others, is we're actually willing to put our butts in the line for results. And so anyway, back to the retreat, we had a CFO and he literally had these reports that he had printed out, like a bunch of financial reports. And he spent most of the couple days at the back of the room with his back almost turned to us, reading these reports. And he was completely checked out. He thought this work was a bunch of BS. He thought this soft stuff is waste of time, sort of had that mindset to him. Well, fast forward a month or two, and my business partner and co-author Brad's walking down the hallway, and the CFO flags him down, pulls him into his office, and says, "Hey, look, I owe you an apology. I did not think this was worth it. I thought this was total BS. But I got to tell you, I'm seeing changes around here. I'm seeing changes in people. People are much more accountable. People are much more willing to step up and take ownership of things and to get stuff done." And he could see the transformation happening within his teammates, which was then, having an impact on the greater culture and the hundreds of employees that they served. So he wasn't this grouchy old man. He was just so frustrated that they weren't doing what they said they would do. And he was like, why am I wasting more time at this retreat? So his commitment was to something bigger. It was to making the organization better. He was just at the moment sort of behaving poorly. But he's become a great source of referrals actually since then.
Wow. Example of people in different situations that when you see those things happening, care enough to engage them on a level that they need to be engaged on can change hearts, can change minds, can convert people out of one situation into a better situation through example, through talking them through it, showing them things. A lot of people need to be shown, not told, right? Um, so, Tom, man, thank you for all of the great work you're doing. This is hard work, by the way. Employee engagement, dealing with people, the dynamics of the workforce, and all the crazy stuff that's going on in our world around us. This is extremely hard work. So, thank you.
It's not for the faint of heart, that's for sure. But it's also what makes the work so life giving and valuable is that you're literally making a difference, in other people's lives. And what better way to spend your life, in my opinion?
Absolutely. I completely agree. Hard work takes courage, but when you put the hard work in, you make the most difference, right? Great things never happen in a comfort zone. Great things never happen in the back of the room. Great things never happen um, when you're just kind of walking around like a zombie, not engaged, right? Great things happen when people are engaged, when their full potential is being tapped into, and they feel free, they feel open and safe to really put themselves out there, even if it makes them look silly or goofy or they make a mistake or whatever. Just putting forth the effort, unleashes things you may or may not have ever even known about people. And I was in the military, we were put in very dangerous situations at times. And I was a commander, I was an officer in charge. And one of my top priorities is the safety of all the people that are with me and making sure we don't make dumb decisions that puts people in greater risk than absolutely necessary to achieve the mission. And when you're staring down the gun barrels of bad guys wanting to shoot you and cause harm to you or kill you, it's a challenge to motivate people to go running into that situation. And when you can tap into that, and create a greater cause around that, people will walk to the gates of hell for their teammates, for their bosses, for their family, their friends, or whoever, because there's a purpose there. And so, thank you for the great work you're doing. Thank you for writing that awesome book. Lots of wonderful things in that book. I think you laid it out really, really clearly for even, everyday Joe dummies like me to get it and get it pretty easy. And so great job on the book. Highly encourage people to read it. Tom, if people want to talk to you, get access to you, want to learn more about what you do and how to engage their folks, what's the best way for them to contact you and interact with you?
Yeah, great question. Probably the easiest is just my email, which is tom@phoenixperform.com. I'm also on LinkedIn under Thomas Willis. Our company is Phoenix Performance Partners out of Michigan. Also have the team here put together a landing page for you. It'll be phoenixperform.com/Soar Hire Coaching. And that way folks will get some access to some resources. I'll make sure that we put a couple things on there for your audience as well. And but yeah, a few different options. And thanks again for having me. This has been a lot of fun.
Awesome, man. That's really great. We're going to also take all of the information Tom was talking about with his contact. We're going to put all that in the show notes as we normally do to make it real easy for you to just click right in there, grab it, capture it, paste it into an email or a phone call or whatever. It works good for you to follow with Tom. Highly, highly recommend Tom and his work. Yeah, he is truly an expert in this space, and it's a pleasure to have you on the show. And so, as we kind of recap here, listen the greatness out of people. If you're a leader and you're looking to change your organization, whether you're struggling or whether you're doing well and you're looking to continue to do better, no matter where you are, business is people. You have to care about people. You have to lead people. You have to be engaged with people. And one of the things that I found in my leadership of 12 different organizations to work really, really well is to manage by walking around, which was a President Abraham Lincoln principle that he used, he wrote about, where you just walk around, get out from behind the desk, get off your phone, get off email, get off the speaker system, get off of whatever, and just make time at least once a week, 30 minutes, an hour, whatever, and just walk around with no agenda, with no wanting anybody to do anything for you. This is just you walking around, just talking to people. How's your day going? How's that project? How's your new baby that you had that was born last week? How's your sick dog doing? I know that was really bothering you a couple weeks ago. Like, just ask people about what's going on. And if you want to get really creative, and you see they're stressed and they're concerned about things, or they're behind, or things are going on and they're upset, ask them a really big question like, what's the number one thing going on with you that if I were able to help you could make the biggest difference? Boy, that's a powerful question. So take these tools of listening the greatness out of people, talk to people. If you want an engaged organization, you yourself as a leader need to be engaged more than they are, and they will reciprocate that. So take these great points. You will have a better, more engaged, thriving organization that will ultimately outcompete the competition and live life with a greater purpose, your company purpose and individual purpose. So that's it for today's show. Hope you got a lot of great things out of this. Next week we've got another great one. Next week we're going to be talking about how to unleash your creativity, your drive, or your next innovation and conquer the next mountain for you. We've got an expert on the show going to talk about that. It's a great show to piggyback on today's show. Look forward to having that conversation with you next week. Have a great week, everybody.